Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into a really fascinating story, one you might not expect. When you picture Cambridge University, well, you think of the history, the academic prestige, those amazing old colleges,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. It's got this incredible global reputation.
But for many international students, especially thinking back to the latter half of the 20th century, that environment could actually be quite isolating.
Deeply isolating, yeah. A real sense of cultural displacement, feeling out of step.
And it's right there in that gap, that mix of high academic pressure and cultural loneliness that the Cambridge Chinese Christian Fellowship, or CCCF, started up in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore its history, nearly 50 years of it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it as this compelling example of what you might call contextual diaspora missiology.
Right, which sounds complicated, but it's really about how faith adapts and, well, works within specific cultural groups who've moved from their homeland, using their unique context.
Exactly. And we'll see how focusing on that specific cultural setting allowed CCCF to become a place for real spiritual growth and also, interestingly, a training ground for future leaders in the global church.
It's a fantastic story, really. And we can break it down into roughly 3 phases. First, the founding vision back in the 70s.
Okay.
Then its growth, and significantly planting a church in the 80s and 90s.
Church planting, wow.
Yeah. And finally, how it adapted and connected globally from the 2000s onwards.
Great. So let's start back in the 70s. To really get CCCF, you have to understand its founder, Abraham Sheehan.
A key figure.
He was doing a PhD, applied mathematics of all things. But it wasn't just his studies. He was what people call a third culture kid.
Right, meaning he grew up across different cultures.
Yeah, born in Taiwan, raised in Brazil and the U.S., and then studying there in the U.K.
Yeah.
And that personal journey gave him this real empathy, for other Chinese heritage students and also nurses in Cambridge who were clearly struggling to fit in.
And it's important to understand his idea for CCCF, it wasn't him criticizing the main university Christian union, the CICCU.
Okay, so not trying to replace it or anything.
No, not at all. It was more of a specific missiological insight. Bartow Wiley, who worked with Friends International, he put it really well. He said Chian wanted to keep mission at the center.
Keep mission at the center.
Yeah, he was worried this specific focus might get lost, sort of subsumed, if they just joined CICCU without maintaining that distinct purpose. Wiley saw that CCCF had this particular opportunity, as he put it, to support and reach Southeast Asian Chinese students.
Because they understood the context better.
Exactly. Believing the gospel message could be shared most effectively by people who understood their home issues. It's a really positive vision for contextual mission.
That makes sense. So it's not just for Chinese students, but positioned to reach them more effectively because of that shared understanding. That's that contextual idea in practice.
Precisely.
And interestingly, this mission wasn't just contained within the university, was it?
No, right from the start, it went broader. And actually, that reflects how many Chinese churches started across Britain around that time.
How so?
Well, CCCF made a real effort to connect with the local Chinese immigrant community. Many were working incredibly long hours, in restaurants, takeaways, often quite isolated.
Right.
And this fits with what scholars like Edmund Tang have documented. He showed that many post-war Chinese churches in the UK began as grassroots efforts, often supported by parachurch groups working alongside churches.
Like the Chinese Overseas Christian Mission, COCM. I think they helped CCCF get started.
They did, yes. And often the ministry didn't start with formal services. It started with practical help, welfare support, maybe language classes, social gatherings, especially for Cantonese speakers arriving from Hong Kong.
So the students in CCCF, they kind of instinctively picked up on this model.
It seems so. They started doing home visits, running an informal Sunday school. It's a perfect example of diaspora as mission.
Meaning the migrants themselves are the ones doing the evangelism.
Yes, within their own scattered communities. It really shows how, the Holy Spirit can work through very practical, relational starting points. Shared culture, shared language, they become natural pathways for the gospel.
That's a powerful foundation. So moving into the 80s and 90s, how did CCCF build on that? You mentioned maturation, growth.
Yeah, this was a period where things really solidified. That initial vision turned into this thriving community. You saw a deepening of what the Bible calls koinonia, that shared life, fellowship, and also a bolder expansion of their mission outreach.
What did that look like day to day or week to week?
Well, the community life itself became really important. Thursday evenings at Henry Martin Hall were key. They always started with a shared meal.
Food, always important.
Always. It was this act of, well, some call it radical hospitality, really built community. And you had lots of engaged students, particularly from Singapore and Malaysia at that time.
Interesting.
They even had a songbook they'd painstakingly typeset on the university computers.
Oh, wow. Dedication.
Definitely. You know, the sound of guitars and pianos, worship. It created a real atmosphere.
And you're saying these weren't just like social activities?
No, sociologists might call it building a plausibility structure.
A plausibility structure.
Yeah, basically, in a place like Cambridge, very individualistic, high pressure, seeing this loving, supportive Christian community in action made the message of the gospel more believable. It gave it credibility.
So that hospitality, those shared rhythms, they weren't just nice things to do. They actually made faith seem possible, believable in that environment. That's quite profound.
It really is.
And you mentioned something even bigger happening in this era of church planting.
Yes, that was the most significant development. That early outreach to the local Chinese community, it grew steadily. It went from informal chats to a regular Bible study.
Okay.
And then eventually a Sunday afternoon service, they were able to use the building of Eden Baptist Church for that.
So it evolved organically.
Very much so. And the culmination was in 1997. That's when the Cambridge Chinese Christian Church, CCCC, became its own independent entity.
Wow, from student fellowship to a full church.
Exactly. And you could see it as what the missiologist Andrew Walls calls the indigenizing principle, reaching its natural conclusion.
The indigenizing principle, meaning the faith taking root in the local culture.
Precisely. The Christian faith wasn't just being preached at Cambridge, it was being embodied in Cambridge in a local, self-governing, self-supporting, self-propagating church with its own distinct Chinese characteristics, but rooted there.
And that shift from being mainly student-focused to becoming more family-oriented with the church plan, did that reflect broader changes?
Yes, absolutely. It mirrored a wider shift happening in Chinese churches across the UK at the time. They were learning how to minister not just to the first-generation immigrants, but also to their children, the British-born generation.
Okay, so a major milestone with the church plant in '97. What happened next for CCCF, the student fellowship, as it moved into the 2000s? Did it still have a purpose?
It absolutely did, but it needed to maybe redefine or refocus its specific role. The church planting vision was fulfilled, so this next era involved things like adjusting its constitution, thinking strategically about partnerships.
And leaning into its identity as a place for training leaders.
Yes, and really engaging with that. And a key factor here was the spiritual inheritance many members brought with them.
Especially from Southeast Asia, you mentioned.
That's right, particularly Malaysia. If you look at the history of Christianity there, especially among the Chinese community, it's often marked by really vibrant evangelical faith, strong lay leadership, so non-ordained people taking initiative.
Okay.
And mission schools had played a huge role for generations. So many Malaysian students arriving in Cambridge, they weren't, blank slates spiritually.
Yeah.
Exactly. They came from churches where being active, leading small groups, sharing their faith, that was normal.
So CCCF didn't have to build that leadership culture from scratch.
No, in many ways it inherited it, which was a huge blessing, of course.
Were there any maybe complexities with that? Different styles, perhaps?
That's a fair question. I mean, sure, there might have been slightly different cultural nuances to navigate, even within the wider Chinese identity. But the shared faith and the core vision really helped smooth those things over. It meant CCCF's role shifted.
Shifted how?
It wasn't just about initial evangelism for everyone. For many, it became about deeper discipleship, about advanced leadership development. Cambridge became this unique leadership incubator.
What did that incubation look like practically? What were students learning?
Well, think about it. They had to learn to explain their faith clearly and thoughtfully in a very secular, very intellectual environment. That sharpens you.
Definitely forces you to think things through.
Right. And they were navigating cross-cultural dynamics right there within the fellowship, different Chinese backgrounds, different experiences. Plus, they were taking on real responsibility. Organizing events, handling money, leading Bible studies. These are tangible leadership skills.
So it created this kind of cycle.
A really powerful feedback loop, yeah. CCCF benefited hugely from the energy and experience coming from, say, the Malaysian church. And in turn, it equipped these students who then went back to Malaysia or Singapore.
Taking new skills and a broader perspective with them.
Exactly. Ready to serve their home churches with perhaps a renewed vision and practical tools learned in Cambridge. It's a great example of reciprocal mission.
Now, you also mentioned a challenge during this period reaching students from mainland China.
Yes, that was, and likely remains, a significant challenge. Students from the PRC often came with a very different worldview, shaped by decades of official atheism.
So it wasn't just a language barrier.
No, much deeper than that. It really underlined the complexity of contextualization. It's not just about translating words, it's about engaging with fundamentally different assumptions about life, reality, everything. That takes immense wisdom and patience.
A long-term effort.
Very much so. Building trust, finding common ground, answering deep questions.
And during this time, how did CCCF relate to other Christian groups? Did it stay independent?
It did. It continued to operate as a parachurch ministry, choosing partnership rather than being absorbed. They worked alongside CICCU, the main CU.
In that Paul and Barnabas model you mentioned.
Kind of like that, yeah. Recognizing they had different complementary roles. And they also engaged with newer groups that emerged, like just Love Cambridge, focusing on social justice issues.
So adapting its partnerships too.
Yeah, it shows a real maturity, I think. Secure in its core mission, but flexible and open to collaborating where it made sense for the bigger picture.
Okay, so pulling this all together, it's quite a journey. From this small group of students feeling out of place to a really vibrant community, planting a church, becoming this enduring spiritual feature in Cambridge.
It really is. And its story powerfully shows that theological idea, the universal message of the gospel. It often shines brightest when it's expressed through very particular culturally specific forms of the church.
And seeing it connected to the wider story, the Chinese diaspora in Britain, the churches back in Southeast Asia, it wasn't just happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. It was both shaped by and contributing to these bigger global movements.
You mentioned Andrew Wall's ideas earlier, the indigenizing principle, faith taking root locally.
Yes, allowing faith to have, Chinese characteristics in Cambridge. But Walls also talks about the Pilgrim principle.
The Pilgrim principle.
Which reminds Christians that their ultimate identity is in Christ, transcending all earthly cultures. It pulls them towards a universal global family and vision.
So CCCF managed to hold both. Rooted locally, but looking globally.
I think it did beautifully. Its legacy isn't really about buildings or numbers, is it? It's measured in the generations of lives changed, leaders equipped.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How focusing intently on the specific needs of one particular group, maybe a group that felt overlooked, how that can unleash something with ripple effects far beyond what anyone could have planned, not just locally, but globally. It leaves you wondering, perhaps, where are those specific overlooked needs in our own communities today? And what might happen if we address them with that kind of focused, culturally sensitive intention? Definitely something to mull over.
A challenging thought to end on.
Indeed. Well, thank you for walking us through that incredible story. And thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.